The grapevines I used to make this table are very old, so I had to do some restoration work and leveled them up with epoxy. I used a 1/2 inch plywood for the substrate, moss mix, stones, sand, coarse silica sand, and shells to create the island. I did a total of 5 pours, one for each level going up to the vines. I removed the molding, and at this point the total weight is about 400 pounds, so it was time to lift it up off the table and onto the floor. I used my attic hoist along with pulleys to center the cable over the table. I used a 5-to-1 mechanical advantage for more leverage and attached both to a prusik on the rope, which was attached to a 2x4 frame under the table. With the hoist cable taut and at its 400-pound lifting capacity, I had to use the MA to lift it up off the table in order to slide the table out. I untied the MA and continued belaying the table as I lowered it to the floor with the hoist. I have fixed another dam for the channel pour. I did an 1/8 of an inch pour and allowed that to tack up before adding more stones, and then did another pour on those stones. What road, Jackson? Major fail. Mama had a major fail. Look at there. That's where it's supposed to be. That's where it was last night. And I had a little bit of a leak right here. Oh, right under there. Right under this lip. So I took a big glob of caulk and I squished it up in there. Squished it up over here. And it stopped the leak. So I thought. Evidently, it moved on down this area. Down in here. And it leaked every bit of that out that I poured. 126 ounces. I don't even want to think about it, Jackson. I don't want to think about it. Me either. Want to go swimming? Yeah. That'll help, won't it? Yep. Go swim. After fixing the leak, I completed the pour, and once it was completely cured, I installed the 1/2 inch by 1 inch strips of wood to create the gap. Initially, I had planned on putting the LED lights through a clear tube and embedding them in the epoxy. However, if the LED strip became faulty, they would be impossible to replace. Even though I completely covered the strips with packing tape and wax, they were a chore to remove. I used a blunt spike to get the ends started. I drilled screws into the edge for leverage, and then used wedges to get them the rest of the way out. I think it helped that I poured a thin layer on top of the strips and let it dry before adding more stones and epoxy. I managed to remove all 4 strips without damaging the epoxy. I moved the table back outside. I sanded up to 220 before fixing the dam for another pour. I added silica sand to blend the ocean edge with the sloping stone wall and poured another 1/2 inch to clear epoxy, creating a really nice 3D visual. I sanded up to 220 again, and I wanted to contour the sides and expose the stones more, so I used a diamond blade to cut and a flat disc to smooth before sanding from 40 grit to 220 grit. I used painter's tape for the dam and poured a 1/4 inch of clear epoxy. I allowed that to cure for several weeks before rounding over the edges and then wet sanding from 320 to 10,000 grit. I'm using 3M's Compound 1 and 2, Wizard's Polish, and Nano for finishing the surface. I had to sand this down again because I had a couple places right in here where the buffer scratched it. I think I held it there too long, or I had a piece of compound, dry compound, in the wool pad that may have gotten stuck, so caused that to happen. But anyway, I sanded it, wet sanded from 320 back to 10,000, and that's where we're at, and we're ready to do the compound again. So this is the 5th polish here with the compound, And if you follow that light, you can still see. Try a couple more. Okay, we got it all evened out. Okay, so the polish and sealant has been applied. Now I just need to get up in this area here and clean off the polish that's in these little nooks and crannies, which is going to be a blast. I can't wait to get started on that. I drilled a hole through the epoxy for the LED strip. The LED strip is 110. I tried the DC kind, but the lights were dull. They are doable, though, if the cord is a problem. The remote is simple and has several different options. I used 1/2-inch twine rope for the gap. Ooh, that's still a little hot. Press that in there. Ooh, ah. I screwed a cleat on each end to wrap the excess rope around after the table is in place. The rope runs through 6 hooks, and there are a total of 6 100-pound casters, 2 of which can be locked. The weight is about 500 pounds, so it can hold lots and lots of bottles of wine before it reaches capacity.